everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for Inside Sauceball. I'm Dylan Lacey, Sauce Labs' Manager of Developer Relations, and your moderator for today. Our goal with this panel is to help you learn from the expertise veteran Sauce staff have with software delivery practices from dozens of industries and thousands of customers. All of our panelists have multiple years investigating, advising, and improving our customers' tests and procedures, either upfront or when things have gone wrong. And once I've introduced them, we'll be asking them to tell us what kinds of behaviors and tools they see successful Sauce Labs customers deploy to achieve digital confidence. We're also going to ask them what unsuccessful customers do. One thing I've learned as a professional bug hunter is your best weapon is adequate time. So we're pre-recording this session to make sure we don't have any technical problems. As such, we won't be taking any questions, but if you do want to ask a follow-up question, just tweet it using the hashtag SauceCon. Then keep an eye on our social media for details of a follow-up session. Sounds good? Great. Now let's get started with our introductions. Just for fun, I asked our panelists to bring in the best non-software related tests they know of. So let's find out what they brought. Enrique, please tell me who you are, your job title, how long you've been at Sauce Labs, and the best non-software test.
Hello, my name is Enrique Gonzalez. I'm a senior manager of customer support here at Sauce, and it's a bit of a stretch, but I came up with a beer flight. You know, you're testing the beers, which one's your favorite. So that's what I chose.
Nice. Evelyn, can you tell me who you are, your job title, how long you've been at Sauce, and the best non-software test?
Hi, thank you. My name is Evelyn Coleman. I've been at Sauce for about 4 years. I'm a technical project manager working in implementation. And my favorite non-software related test is a final exam because it means that your class is over.
That is extremely relatable. Josh, your turn.
All right. Thanks for having me. I am Josh Grant, a manager of the Solution Architect team, and I've been at Sauce for 4 years as a Solution Architect. And I think after thinking about it, one of my favorite non-software tests is testing new recipes. I'm a perfect person to test new recipes because I'll eat anything and try anything once.
Excellent. All right. Last and certainly not least, Lakshmi.
Thank you. I'm Lakshmi Rao, and I'm a senior manager at Sauce here for 3 years. My favorite non-software test, I think I'm probably the one who's going to go most serious. So we have a family of survivors of breast cancer, so I think a negative mammogram test probably is up there for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great answer. All right, let's start with an easy question. Are most of the test suites you folks see efficient, well-designed, and as value-providing as they could be?
I guess.
See, I thought this was easy. Apparently, everybody's either not sure or trying to be very political.
I will step in as a solution architect because I actually see the things that people do. And so the answer is sometimes, not always. So as a solution architect, I get to see different tests, different approaches people have taken, and it really does run the board. Some tests are really efficient; they're really great. Developers on those teams spend a lot of time making sure their tests are effective and efficient and provide value. And then sometimes that's not the case. You have tests that are long running, tests that are clearly just copied over from some kind of manual test plan, not too valuable. So a little bit of both would be my answer.
Fair enough. Lakshmi and Enrique, you probably see tests when something has gone wrong more often. Do you tend to find problems with the tests themselves or source, or is it 50-50?
I'd say it's a combination of both. Either the test just full on, right? It's not doing what it's supposed to, or like you said, provides no value. Or sometimes, not obviously, sometimes maybe it's what we are doing, right? In our cloud, being a cloud provider, we might not be doing something as they expect. Sometimes it's somewhere down the middle, right? That the test is just not optimized for what we do and how Sauce, runs on our side of the house. And that marriage sometimes is not that great.
I think it's a gamut, I believe. We usually first look at what's wrong on our side, of course. So I would say it's somewhere 50-50. Most of our big customers know what they're doing. They write pretty good, efficient tests. Some of our small customers who's just new to automation need a little bit more hand-holding. So it varies.
Yeah, fair enough. Evelyn, I know you're often really passionate about arguing to help customers get the value that they deserve from Source Labs. Do you think customers' tests give them the value that they need?
I do think that customers' tests give them the value that they need as long as they're running them. On the subject of the quality of the test that we see, some customers have very high quality tests that run very fast, and others are just getting started. But I think what's most important is not waiting until you reach perfection to make sure that you have tests running.
Alrighty, so what Source Labs features or misconceptions cause the most problems for customers? Can we start with you, Lakshmi?
Oh, wow. Um, that's a tough one. I mean, there is a feature that comes out so often that I think the lack of documentation, probably, or not having enough visibility into something new that just came out, is probably at top of the list. Yeah.
And when you say documentation, do you mean our documentation or customer internal documentation or tool documentation?
Source documentation of any new feature release. Yeah.
Josh, do you agree?
I do agree, especially for newer features that come out. Sometimes people just aren't aware of how they work or the use case. They're fun features. Definitely people want, but I agree. Sometimes documentation is lacking or it doesn't quite have what people are looking for. So I can definitely see that. One thing I would say, I've been hearing for a long time, as someone who's been in test automation for a long time, is that sauce is slow. That's something that I hear a lot. I've heard a lot, and I agree and disagree. I think a lot of people just don't quite understand how different cloud providers work. So, but it's something I hear a lot of.
Yeah, we're actually going to touch on that in a little bit. What about Source Connect? I used to get a lot of tickets about that when I was in support. Is that still something customers struggle with?
I can speak to that for a little bit. Sauce Connect has historically been something that customers maybe need to help getting the right footing with, but we're hoping to start teaching customers more about the basics of Sauce Connect, how it works, and hopefully mitigate some of that. I think there's just a lot more options, and this kind of answers your previous question too. There are a lot of options in Sauce Labs that there's not a lot of awareness about, and Sauce Connect falls under this. There are many options to make it work for you, and knowing which levers to pull to make it the right thing for your network is really going to help you advance. But if you don't know those things, it can be a struggle.
Alrighty. So Josh, you touched on speed. If a customer was to come to you and say, "My tests are running too slow," what kind of things would you investigate?
So the very first thing I would say would be they are slow compared to what? You need a comparison. Are the tests slow? Do you have a single test that is slow compared to a single test run on your local grid or on your local laptop, on your local environment? Do you have a suite of tests that are slow compared to your local environment? It's because when it comes to speed, there's a few things to keep in mind. Sauce is a cloud provider, so things have to go up to the cloud and back from the cloud. So that's going to be longer than running against like a local instance where everything's on one machine. Computers are fast. Those are definitely things I would look into at first.
Fair enough. Enrique, what about if you had a support ticket? Kind of what steps would you take to investigate a slow test?
Yeah, no, similar to what Josh said, I think the main thing, that we try within support is trying to understand where the slowness is coming from, right? There's maybe three main places where a slowness could be coming from, right? One could be, like Josh was saying, the up and backs, right? And that's especially true when you're moving from a local grid or, locally from your same machine test over to the cloud, right? Where maybe 1,000 commands is not that much for you, right? They're going very, very fast. But those 1,000 commands, right? That small latency times 1,000, it eats up time. That could be one. Other thing could be just Selenium itself, right? Maybe you're not, the commands you're doing are not as performant as they can be. And the third one is just the other side of the house, right? What you're testing, your site under test. That's also not locally anymore, right? Needs to go through the internet as well. So we try to investigate where is the slowness coming from, and depending on where we see that, we can attack, collaborate with solutions architects and see, hey, how can we better, better create this test or tweak this test to make it better. Or if it's on the other side of the house, like the side under test, right? What can we do with Sauce Connect to make it more performant?
Is there advice you could give customers without looking at their tests? Like, I think you should look at this, and then this, and then this.
I think by looking at a test, a customer can see where the slowness is coming from, right? If you really take a look and try to understand, one of the main kind of value adds of Sauce is that those videos and those logs, right? That sometimes even in support we forget that they're there. They can really provide some insight of what is actually going on. Is the browser, because sometimes the browsers have issues, right? Browser vendors aren't perfect either, right? So by looking at the logs and the video, it can tell a big part of the story.
You mentioned network latency, both Josh and Enrique. Do you think that's the most common cause of problem?
I'd say so. Either on one side of the one side of the end or the other. I think it's a big issue that it's solvable. There's many ways to battle it, but it's one that is hard to get at and hard to understand. So, but I'd say that aside from tests being broken, right, which we can talk about all day, network latency is a bit of a silent killer.
Fair enough. Evelyn, do you think customers have good mental models of these kinds of things, like how their tests are working, what Selenium's doing, what kind of places slowness comes from?
Don't know how to put this politically. I don't think that's always the case. I think that the system, like Josh and Enrique have mentioned, is large. It involves both Sauce Labs infrastructure and the customers. And it's easy to look at the thing that you're most familiar with. If you're most familiar with network latency and your customer, that might be the place where you think the slowness or the defect is coming from. If you're more familiar with your own tests and you think those have always worked before, it might be easiest to jump to something being wrong with Sauce Labs. So I don't always think it's a matter of not knowing the architecture or how these systems are set up, but more just when you're hammer, everything is a nail.
That's a really good point. So teams can get like value by deliberately trying to look at different angles from what they're used to.
Exactly.
Speaking of angles, sometimes customers have internal technical or even organizational problems that prevent them from making full use of Sauce Labs. Your teams are often brought in to help these customers resolve their issues. Is there anything you see in common in the customers who are ultimately unsuccessful at getting them resolved? Let's start with Lakshmi.
Um, I think the biggest challenge that we see is that sometimes people that reach us have a very narrow exposure of what exactly the problem is and who they should be involving in their team before reaching out to us. Um, we often end up navigating that for them and help asking them, do you have a developer that we can talk to? Do we have a network person that we can reach out to, and so on. So I feel that there is definitely a bit of a bottleneck, especially for customers that probably have bigger teams where they just get a build that they need to test and they really don't know how the team is structured and who they can reach out to themselves.
Fair enough. Josh, you probably get involved earlier than Lakshmi or Enrique would tend to. Do you have a different answer here?
Yes, I do have another answer. So one thing I've seen, especially with larger organizations, large companies, is that, and older companies, I guess I should say, is that teams will be given things to automate, given tasks to automate, tests to automate that aren't suitable for browser testing or aren't suitable for automation. But that is their task that is given to them. And so I sometimes have to walk through things with these folks to say, it's maybe not a good idea to automate this, or like maybe you shouldn't use a tool like Selenium or Appium. You should use another approach. That can be tricky. That can be a difficult conversation to have, especially since there is an understanding that Sauce is a tool that can help you with these sorts of things. So, and that can be a mismatch too between like the practitioner, like the SDET or the developer actually tasked with doing this, and sort of the management above saying like we have these organizational goals we have to achieve. So that can be fun. But luckily, I've had a lot of good conversations with developers who agree. Yeah, developers who do agree that like maybe there's something fishy going on here just with the task. So that's something I see sometimes.
Fair enough. You both kind of mentioned developers versus QA teams. Our marketing team might be mad about this, but do you have opinions on having integrated QA versus separate QA teams? Do you generally think it's good? Is it generally bad? Does it matter if you're testing mobile or browser or API? You're all looking a little shocked, so I'm going to pick on Enrique to start with.
I think, at the end of the day, I think it depends on the organization, right? You can have, I've worked with separate, kind of the more traditional QA and dev ecosystems, right, within a customer organization that are great, right? And I think it kind of touches what Josh and Lakshmi were mentioning, which I think successful companies, what they have that others don't, is communication. They're able to communicate. So if you're separate, you have separate departments of QA versus dev. If they are efficient at communicating, their tasks, their blockers, and general kind of mutual understanding and trust within each other, I think they can be successful. On the other side of the coin, right, when it's all integrated, obviously, that communication is easier, right? You're one same team, but there can be other things, right? Maybe they don't see the way, they don't have that mindset of how to test these things and actually be successful at it. So at the end of the day, it's if they can communicate efficiently, I think that either of them will work just fine.
Fair enough. Does anybody else have anything to add? You're all glad Enrique jumped on that grenade, or rather, I pushed him on it.
It was a good answer. I have to say it was a good answer. But communication is really important, and I mean, I've worked as I guess as an integrated QA on a dev team, and it was great. It was a fantastic team in the past, not now. Um, and I've worked in like a siloed org where you have QA, you have automation people, and you have developers all in different kind of silos, and that works less well. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of depends. Like Ricky makes a good point about communication.
Fair enough. Rather than like QA versus dev teams, some companies have a center of excellence or like a unified platform they deploy tests to. Often that's been tailored for something like browser testing, and then customers want to add mobile testing onto it. Do you find that people have that kind of problem, or do those kind of things tend to work smoothly?
I think I would like to hear from Evelyn on this, since she's pretty well versed in this area.
I've definitely worked with some customers who've had testing centers of excellence. I think the advantage to that when you're making decisions about adding mobile is that now you have someone with almost a level of authority in testing. So whoever's the director of the center of excellence, or sometimes it can be higher than a director, can help with hiring imperatives or negotiating certain policies. And you do have to make some changes when you start to integrate mobile. And if you have authority to help drive those changes from the top down, I think it can help. The opposite is also true. You might have, depending on your center of excellence, you might have some folks who are out of touch with the people in the trenches actually writing the test automation or making those decisions. So it's just about how tight that organization is within your company and whether or not their primary job is to fight up for you as, testing org, or to kind of train down, or a little bit of both.
I want to move on kind of to more successful things that customers do. What skill or process contributes the most to making a successful delivery team successful? Lakshmi?
So, what processes can make a team successful in delivery?
Yeah,
I'm
like,
just making sure I
is
understand the
there something you
question.
see in common with teams that are highly capable, that get their problems solved, that are getting value from their testing processes?
I feel the integration, how tightly they work with their developers or any other organizations, any other groups within their own organization that directly impact the speed as well as the quality of testing. I mean, what they want to test and then how fast they want to test it. It all depends on how well their automation code is written and how much depth or how broadly it covers all their functional tests that they would like to see. And that in turn comes from inputs from these various groups within the organization.
So testing is a contact sport.
Yeah, I think it's more about understanding your organization's requirements. What is this app about? What do you want to test? What is the outcome that you want to see? Is it performance? Is it functionality? What exactly are you trying to achieve
Fair
from
enough.
running this test? Yeah.
Enrique, do you agree with Lakshmi?
I think so. I think that's a big important part. I think also in terms of, because you mentioned also skills, right? What are the skills that a good organization has? And I think it's being nimble, right, and being flexible to change. We all know here in the testing space, it's ever changing and very, very quickly, right? Browser releases happen every couple of weeks, every month or so, and with that comes new challenges. And so the organizations and the teams that can adjust to those changes, whether it be literally changing automation code, right, to make it work on the new version or the new platform, or just in the way of thinking, right, and how things shift and methodologies change, those are the ones that are the most successful. And over many customers that we've seen, those are the ones that at the end of the day excel at automation and getting their testing done.
Fair enough. Um, just kind of on the theme of being nimble, I know that all of you get exposed to new tools, new solutions fairly regularly. How do you make sure you keep up? How do you learn a new tool? Do you wait until the customer brings it to you and then go do something in particular? And if so, what does that process kind of look like? Let's start with Josh.
Yeah, this is a great question. One of the things I try to do is just include some slack in my schedule, in my time, just to try out something, try to learn something. I would say I'm about 60-40 in problems that are brought to me by a customer versus things I learn about on my own. Um, Customers bring all sorts of interesting situations, like new tools, new approaches, which is something I need to learn about. What's interesting about Sauce at this point in time is that we also get like a lot of old school classic. Like I still work with customers and they use Java and TestNG and Selenium. Um, Still struggling with Maven, right? And how Maven configuration works. So I try to keep up on newish stuff as best I can, just through either what's out there, what people are doing, what customers are doing at Sauce, but also checking on my tweets, checking on stuff to see what's new and exciting. Yeah.
Fair enough. Evelyn, you look like you have opinions.
I feel like I'm just still sprinting to keep up with the things that customers use on the regular, as well as all of the updates and improvements that we put out. So in terms of staying fresh on new technology, I love to see people chatting about new technologies in our Slack and just kind of making a mental note, um, but also spend the majority of my time concentrating on what most customers are using and kind of the current trends.
Lakshmi, Enrique, are there kind of your approaches represented there? Do you folks do something different?
I agree with Enrique. I think with Evelyn, I think that Slack is a big source for hearing anything that comes out new and fresh. I think part of being support is sometimes you get on customer calls and hear things for the first time, and they may probably be 10 steps ahead of the time. So it creates a sense of urgency for us to sort of catch up and read up more. And that's where I think most of my inputs come from. The most recent one is probably the BiteEye support that is going to be introduced in Selenium 4. And it just came up in a conversation, and I wasn't sure what that was. And not only did it come up, they actually had a plan of how they want to implement and what they want to do with it. They wanted to integrate like webhooks and so on. So I'm like, okay, what is BiDi, what does it do, and how can this integration even work? How is it done? So it was just like as we were conversing, I was actually going and trying to figure it out and build upon it after the conversation ended. So there is probably not a clean route to learning something new. It's just as you hear it, it's part of curiosity.
Great answer. Enrique, do you have anything to add, or are you kind of happy with?
No, I think with what everyone said, right? I think kind of going off of what Lakshmi said, it's oftentimes within support, right? It's, and we try to get these, career development and, these times for our, CSCs to be able to learn more things. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of it that comes on the fly, right? And the best example I've been able to give is a few years ago, right? Everything was more on the traditional mobile, right? Mobile app development, Java for Android, Swift or C# for iOS, and now we need to learn, React Native. More recently, conversations about Flutter have come up. So as these things come up, and more importantly, as customer, tickets come in about that, and that's when you need to kind of sit down and say, okay, I guess I'm going to learn Flutter today, right? And then we can hopefully kind of share the knowledge with the entire team, so that one person can learn it and kind of spread that joy with the rest of the team.
Fair enough. Well, we're coming to the end of our time today. Viewers, just a reminder, if you want to pose a follow-up question, just tweet it at us with the hashtag SourceCon. But just as a closing question, I'd like to ask each of you, what single change could customers make to achieve better digital confidence?
It sounds like a cliche, but quality is everyone's responsibility. It's everyone's job. If you are a developer, if you're an SDET, if you're a product owner, if you are a manager, if you're an executive, whoever you are, just take a look and see what your app is doing, see what your customers want, talk to people, and make it your responsibility to provide that level of quality you expect.
Excellent. Evelyn?
It's a really good question. I would say that an important change would be to have purposeful and meaningful metrics, sort of to test your testing. And if you do happen to have those and you can see that something's not working, just going back off of what Enrique said, is to be nimble and flexible and change what's not working. But you need to know what's happening in your testing first.
Fair enough. Enrique?
I think I'll go kind of a bit of a combination of Josh and Evelyn, which is make sure that the tests that you're doing are useful, right? Kind of going full circle what we talked in the beginning, right? Of there's tests that just are there and that either are passing or failing but provide no value. So make sure that the tests, every so often go back and check. As we said, things change, right? So every so often go back to your tests and ask yourself, if something happens to my app or to my site under test, will these tests catch it and will actually provide value? And go from there.
Fair enough. Lakshmi, you ready?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to top off all of that. I think for us in support, one thing that we struggle with is zeroing in and for customers to ask the right questions. Like, what is the problem? What have you done? And how can we help you help yourself? So I think that's where the challenge is for us.
Fair enough. Well, thank you all. This has been a really great discussion. I hope our audience has enjoyed it as well. And I hope they enjoyed the rest of our SourceCon. So Enrique, Lakshmi, Josh, Evelyn, thank you so much. And I guess we'll all see you at some other point. Well, I guess we didn't see you today. Keep testing. Bye, folks.